Time now to turn our attention to the international papers, and Theresa May is back with us in studio, who's been scouring those. Theresa, you want to start with something you found: a growing diplomatic crisis in the Philippines, actually between the Philippines and Kuwait, and it's all over the death of a Filipino maid earlier this year.
That's right. At the heart of the standoff between the Philippines and Kuwait is the treatment of Filipino workers overseas, in particular in Kuwaiti households. Joanna Demafelis's body was found in a freezer earlier this year in an apartment abandoned by her Kuwaiti employer. President Rodrigo Duterte has now scrapped a deal seeking to regulate working conditions of overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs as they're known. There was talk that he might find some sort of agreement with the Kuwaitis. He scrapped that and now imposed a permanent ban on Filipinos working in Kuwait. That's what the Philippine Star and the Daily Inquirer, both local papers there, report. The Inquirer notes that this decision will affect about 250,000 people, and the Kuwaiti paper Al Kabas, in fact, because the Kuwaiti press is also talking about it, well, they say the country rejects any breaches and says it wants to work with Manila in trying to find a solution, calling for what it calls balanced diplomacy.
But indeed, a ban on those workers being allowed to work in Kuwait will have a massive impact, I imagine, not just on their families, but on the economy in the Philippines.
Absolutely. The editors at the Manila Times are actually highlighting this in today's editorial, saying obviously it will affect remittances, which are the money that Filipino workers send back home to support their families. This contributes largely to the Filipino economy and the second thing is this decision could prompt an overhaul in the working conditions of all overseas Filipino workers, so potentially even more remittances, a shift in migrant labor policy. That's how the Manila Times calls it. But they hailed this decision, saying it's important for the reputation of the country in the eyes of the international community.
Yeah, to respect workers' rights. Well, meanwhile, Theresa, it's still on the front page of the British papers. You can see it here on the corner of the Times. Rudd quits over scandal of Windrush. Of course, the resignation of Amber Rudd dominating many of the front pages today.
As you see here from the Eye as well, Rudd quits over migrant targets. This after weeks of tensions over the Windrush scandal. She's now quit her post as Home Secretary. The Times, as you said, the Eye reporting this, The Guardian as well. That decision came in late on Sunday. The Windrush scandal is really to do with the government's mistreatment of long-term UK residents who came to the UK as children of workers brought over from the Caribbean to boost labour after the Second World War. They've been targeted rather unfairly as part of a wider government crackdown on illegal immigration and denied basic rights after days of telling a British Parliament that she was unaware of a plan setting targets to deport a certain number of people. Well, a damaging Guardian memo actually revealed the contrary, that she did indeed know, and for some months before.
And of course, her resignation now comes just shortly ahead of local elections in the UK, and many people are looking to see what kind of fallout this is going to have on Theresa May herself.
Well, indeed, that memo hit Rudd like a rush of wind. That's what the Guardian says in this cheeky cartoon here: wind rush, rush of wind. Essentially, she took the fall for Theresa May, literally here, taking the fall. And that's indeed what a lot of the papers are saying. They see her as a, quote, human shield for Theresa May. And many are wondering what's going to happen now that this quote-unquote human shield is no longer there. The Independent's writer says Rudd was brought down by her own inexperience. It wasn't so much a scandal that brought her down. Her downfall came because she tried to tough out a mistake that she made in defending a policy that was changing, and that's really why she was forced to resign.
And a policy, of course, that was put in place by Theresa May before Amber Rudd. Meanwhile, let's move on to another story now, and reactions continue to come in after comedian Michelle Wolf roasted politicians at the White House Correspondents' dinner over the weekend.
Well, whether you like it or not, her roast did not leave anyone sitting on the fence. It prompted boos and walkouts during the White House Correspondents' dinner. She mercilessly targeted Donald Trump, his family, and in particular, most controversially, you might say, his press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Former press secretary Sean Spicer called the dinner a, quote, disgrace on social media. But the comedian in question, Michelle Wolf, is getting a lot of support, like from this Australian pop culture website that notes rather sarcastically that US politicians are upset because a comedian made mean jokes about them. Boo-hoo-hoo. One writer for the Washington Post suggests that maybe, though, it is time to scrap the whole White House correspondents' dinner. It's never been a good idea, this writer argues, for journalists to cozy up to the people they're supposed to be objectively covering, and especially given the climate now, it seems like it's almost, quote, suicidal for the press's credibility.
It is a bit strange, but of course we've even seen at different various levels of US delegates going to those dinners over the years. And actually the Wall Street Journal is focusing its editorial on that topic today.
Well, they actually come in support of Sanders, hailing her stoic silence and remarkable discipline in sitting through that roast. But they say at the same time, what do you expect from Michelle Wolf? She comes from a recent style of comedy that specializes in attacking the politics and values of half the country. And in this editorial, they say the mirror of Saturday night shows why millions of people support Donald Trump, or at least support his policies. Although one user does note that calling Wolf vulgar is a bit hypocritical given Donald Trump's own penchant for crass comments. I'm not going to repeat them, but they're here on this on this tweet.
It is a strange choice of comedian, though, at that dinner, it has to be said. Finally, then, Diptika, from you, there's been an emergency evacuation that took place in Melbourne over what was thought to be a gas leak. Turned out it wasn't exactly that.
Well, 500 people had to be evacuated from a university library in Melbourne over the weekend due to, as you said, a suspected gas leak. Only it turned out to be the rotting odor of this fruit. It's called the durian. It's the world's smelliest fruit. Now, as a fresh fruit, its odor is very, very, very pungent. It's likened to rotting trash or gym socks. So you can only imagine how pungent the smell was as a rotting fruit. Durians are actually banned from some Asian countries for their pungent odor, but it must be said the fruits have amazing powers for the human body.
But are they tasty? I mean, would anybody feel like eating something that's not that bad?
I've never tried it before, and I don't think I want to.
No, I don't think it's for me either, Diptika. I have to say thanks a lot for that wrap-up of the international papers. Okay, well, still to come.